There are so many chemicals all around us, at work and at home. They help us in our daily lives, and we tend to take them for granted. We forget that they can pose serious hazards if they're not handled carefully. This is especially true when it comes to the disposal of hazardous chemicals. Improper disposal can have grave consequences.
Ah, what the heck? This won't make any difference.
Careless disposal of hazardous chemicals can result in serious health and safety problems, environmental damage, and senseless injuries. During the next few minutes, we're going to show you a number of basic chemical disposal guidelines. Following them helps ensure greater safety for you, your co-workers, and your family. And it can also help protect the environment. Remember, it all starts with you. You can make the difference. So let's begin with our first guideline. Always follow proper chemical disposal procedures. At work, this means following your company's disposal procedures and your supervisor's instructions. Because if you don't, you could be asking for serious trouble.
Hey, Amy, did you hear what happened?
I saw the inspector looking around. What's going on?
Big trouble. Somebody dumped some chemical waste in the storm drain.
So how'd the authorities get involved?
Well, apparently when it got to the sewage treatment plant, it caused some problems and they traced it back to us.
Sure wouldn't want to be the guy who dumped those chemicals.
Tell me about it.
Oh, no, this one's full. Oh, they're all full. Oh, what am I going to do?
Where disposal of hazardous chemicals is concerned, there are numerous laws and regulations your company must follow. If you don't take these regulations seriously and take shortcuts like this employee is doing, you could be endangering other people's safety as well as polluting the environment. What's more, you could be exposing your company and yourself to serious liabilities.
I never thought it'd be such a big deal.
The problem is that too many of us don't think. We don't consider the consequences of our actions. But each and every one of us has a direct responsibility for disposing of chemicals in a safe manner. That's why at work you should always place chemical wastes in designated containers. And at home you need to be just as careful.
Hey, Dad, what are you doing? Shouldn't you take that to the recycling center?
I don't want to go all the way up there. What's a little oil gonna hurt?
Hey, it could hurt a lot if everybody did what you're doing. Besides, there's a new town law that says you have to take it to the recycling center.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, if you want to give me the car keys, I could take it there for you.
Fat chance, Tiger.
Often recycling is the answer to a chemical disposal problem. In fact, more and more often it's the law. Check with your local authorities to find out what the requirements are in your area. But even if there isn't a law against it, there are 3 things you should never do.
Why don't you drive?
All right.
Never discard any hazardous chemical down the drain, in a toilet, or on the ground outside. This can contaminate the groundwater, which flows into rivers, lakes, reservoirs, and wells. In high enough concentrations, chemicals can poison the drinking water supply for a whole community. Never burn chemicals to dispose of them. If you do, it could release toxic fumes or even cause a fire or explosion. Never put hazardous chemicals in trash cans or dumpsters destined for landfills. They can leach into the ground and poison wildlife, farm animals, crops, trees, and other vegetation. Never underestimate the destructive power of chemical wastes. Learn what to do with those wastes that you most frequently come into contact with. Of course, there are always new situations, and you may not be sure exactly what to do. And that brings us to our second guideline. When in doubt about how to dispose of any chemical, don't guess what to do with chemical wastes. Find out. Whether on the job or at home, you may need to know more about chemical disposal. At work, that means checking the available information about the chemicals you use and asking your supervisor. At home, contact the manufacturer or call your local sanitation or public works officials.
Okay, so I have to take it to a disposal center. Yes, my town has one.
This point can't be emphasized enough. When you're dealing with chemical disposal, the consequences are far too serious to take chances. So regardless of your situation, find out the proper disposal procedures before you act. And this applies not only to the chemicals themselves. You must also dispose of contaminated materials properly, as you would the chemicals themselves. This applies to any material that has come into contact with chemicals. For example, rags, brushes, newspapers, or drop cloths. Why? That's why. This guideline also applies to materials used to clean up minor spills. At work, proper disposal usually means placing these materials in a covered, fire-resistant container for daily disposal. At home, temporarily keep them outside, separate from other trash, in a covered metal container away from sources of heat and isolated from anything else that can burn, like your house or garage. Then be sure to dispose of all of these materials as you would the chemicals themselves. You must be thorough. This applies to the chemical containers as well. You need to empty chemical containers completely before disposing of them, and dispose of the containers themselves in the appropriate way. Tossing away a not quite empty container of hazardous chemicals could be dangerous.
Amy, quick, call the fire department. The dumpster out back is on fire.
But there was only a little left in the container.
Even a small amount of some chemicals, when left in a container, can be dangerous. They can produce vapors that may be toxic, reactive, ignitable, or explosive. So empty the container completely, dispose of any remaining chemical correctly, and then dispose of the chemical container itself in the proper manner. Sometimes you have to take the additional step of cleaning the container itself before disposal. And be aware that the chemicals used to clean drums may also require special disposal. Check with your supervisor about proper cleaning procedures and what to do with empty chemical containers. Another important step in the disposal process is covered by our next guideline. Separate waste materials. Don't mix chemicals. The reason for this guideline is simple. If you mix chemical wastes, they can react with one another and burn, release toxic vapors, or explode. Of course, when you're disposing of a chemical mixture, it might not be clear which disposal container the waste should go in.
Yeah, Bill, I've got some parts cleaning fluid here, and I don't know how to dispose of it. I know that, but this is a little different. You see, I added something to it. The question is, how do I handle it? Label it with the contents and bring it over to the hazardous waste coordinator, and he'll give me special instructions. Right. Thanks.
Again, if you're unsure what to do with any type of chemical or any mixture of chemicals, ask your supervisor. Remember, not mixing chemical waste is a common sense guideline that can prevent accidents and injuries. Now let's move on to our next guideline. Look for the label. Disposal container labels must indicate what type of waste can be placed in them. This may seem like an obvious point, but look what can happen if containers aren't properly labeled.
You should have let me know that the label was incomplete.
I'm sorry, I was in a hurry.
That's no excuse, Linda. You know better than that.
You're right, Bill. Next time I'll ask.
Fortunately, this time nothing happened. But you could have been hurt. Mixing acetic acid and nitric acid can cause a dangerous reaction. Now, next time, let me know immediately if a disposal container isn't properly labeled.
If disposal containers aren't labeled correctly and completely with the appropriate hazard warnings, someone could unknowingly mix a lethal combination. To prevent this, don't touch unlabeled disposal containers.
I wonder what's in this one. Maybe I should take a look before I put this stuff in.
That's one move you don't want to make. It could be deadly.
Nah, I better check and find out.
If you come across an unlabeled container of chemical waste, don't open it and don't add to it. Notify your supervisor at once. This employee recognized that an unlabeled disposal container was a serious hazard that he shouldn't ignore. He realized that if he combined his chemicals with the unknown contents of the disposal container, he could create a dangerous mixture. So he took responsibility for making his workplace safer for everyone, which is the point of the next guideline. Report unsafe conditions. Notify your supervisor immediately if you notice that a chemical container is leaking. And report not only damaged containers, but missing or illegible labels as well. Unsafe conditions are a safety hazard for everyone. So if you spot one, don't think someone else will take care of it. Instead, you take responsibility for the problem and report it immediately. And that goes for unsafe acts, too. Don't overlook unsafe acts. They could endanger your safety and the safety of others.
Lola, you should bond that container to the disposal drum. One spark and the whole thing could go up in flames.
I'm in a hurry. Nothing's going to happen.
Amy, did you hear about Lola?
No, tell me.
She's in the hospital with third-degree burns.
What happened?
One of the disposal drums caught fire. Somebody said something about a spark. Whew, it's awful, isn't it?
Yeah. I should have stopped her. I should have done something.
Feeling guilty about not taking action doesn't prevent accidents. Doing something does. So what can you do? Step in and explain the proper procedures when you see an unsafe act. And if this isn't possible, speak to your supervisor right away. It's up to you to take responsibility for all aspects of safe chemical disposal. So let's take a minute to review today's guidelines. They're the key to fulfilling this important responsibility. Always follow proper chemical disposal procedures. They're designed to protect us and the environment. Don't guess what to do with waste. Find out. When in doubt about how to dispose of any chemical, ask questions. Dispose of contaminated materials properly, as you would the chemicals themselves. Remember, these materials can pose the same hazards as the chemicals themselves. Empty containers completely before disposing of them. Even a small amount of some chemicals, when left in a container, can be dangerous. Separate waste materials. Don't mix chemicals. If you mix some chemical wastes, they can ignite, release toxic vapors, or even explode. Look for the label. Disposal containers must always be labeled with the chemical contents of the waste. Don't touch unlabeled disposal containers. If you see an unlabeled container of waste, don't open it and don't move it. Notify your supervisor at once. Report unsafe conditions. Notify your supervisor immediately if you notice that a container is leaking or damaged, or if a label is missing or illegible. Don't overlook unsafe acts. If you see somebody disposing of chemicals improperly, explain the proper procedure or notify your supervisor. Now it's up to you. Follow these guidelines at work and at home. Always think twice about every move you make when disposing of chemicals. Consider the costs and the consequences. Remember to play your part in making your workplace, your home, and your community safer, healthier, and more environmentally sound. By knowing what to do and taking the time to do it right, you can and will make a difference. And can you really afford not to?